Is poker a game of skill or is it purely luck? That's what I'm going to answer today. My name is Christian Rauchenwald and welcome to my YouTube channel. But before we are going to look at the questions if poker is a game of skill or luck in the legal sense and also in a logical sense, so like in the real world and not just in the legal system, I actually wanted to quickly share a little bit of my background so you know what kind of experience I have when it comes to playing poker. Roughly 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, I started playing poker myself, and initially for the first couple of months I actually lost quite a lot, but I also enjoyed the game very much, and eventually I started diving into it. I started reading articles, I started reading books about poker theory, and I also started to analyze my own game from a mathematical perspective instead of just blaming winnings to good luck or skill and losses to bad luck. And it may come as a surprise to you, the more time I spent studying game theory and analyzing my own game and also the game of my frequent opponents, the more profit I started to make, so the more regularly I started to win against them. Now back then I was still working as a freelance developer and I made roughly $40 per hour on average in that profession. However, with poker at some point I also eventually reached a point where I made $40 per hour playing poker, and so eventually I actually shut down my business for almost a year and made my living just by playing Pot Limit Omaha. Some of you may be wondering, like, why did I stop playing poker and got back into developing and building my own business when I actually was making money playing poker quite consistently? And the answer is quite simple. As long as you play poker as a hobby, so you play it with money that you can afford to lose and you don't rely on it as an income source, you have less pressure. You're not pressured that you need to earn or win $2,000 this month or $3,000 this month to actually pay your bills. And that was one of the reasons why I eventually stopped playing poker for a living. The other reason was, while you're playing professional poker, you usually play/work at night, which means my days back then consisted of getting home somewhere between 2 and 10 in the morning, sleeping till the afternoon, having breakfast, and then actually going to work again. So finding a game to play poker, and then you play at night. And in addition to that, so because most of your friends that have regular jobs actually are not active during the night, and when they have free time during the weekends, you usually have the best poker games going, so you don't have time to meet them. And as a result, most of the people that you get to spend time with are actually other professional and semi-professional players, as well as gambling addicts that simply cannot stop playing. So overall, it's definitely not what you see in some movies when it comes to playing poker, but it actually is more like having a regular job if you do it for a living. And what most people don't know is, for every hour that you play at the table, you probably spend an hour or maybe even 2 analyzing your game and analyzing your opponent's game to find weaknesses in your own game and fix them, and also to find weaknesses in your opponent's game and exploit them to make sure that you also win in the future. Now that said, if you're curious about watching me playing poker on ggpoker.com, then I recommend that you check the link in the description down below, which leads you to my Twitch channel, and there I'm going live from time to time and actually play some online poker. Now that we got that out of the way and you know that I have a little bit experience when it comes to playing poker, let's look at the legal aspects of playing poker. Over the years the decisions changed a little bit, but I just looked it up recently again, and currently the only country that considers poker a game of skill is actually Brazil. In all other countries it's considered gambling. Now based on that, we could say that poker is not a game of skill, but what's interestingly enough is, for example, a German court ruled at some point that poker players that win consistently, so they play poker for a living and make a consistent profit, actually have to pay taxes on those profits, because in that case suddenly it's not considered luck anymore and it's not considered gambling anymore, but for those few people it's suddenly a game of skill. It's a little bit selective in my opinion to say that for the average person it's gambling, but as soon as you show that you actually can beat the game with skill and consistently make profit, which by definition makes it not gambling anymore in my opinion, suddenly you get treated differently just so the government can make some more money. That's one of the reasons, for example, why many successful poker players within Europe actually moved their residency to Austria, because their poker is also considered gambling, and Austria doesn't have any taxes on gambling winnings that you somehow manage to get. Another quite interesting case actually comes from the US, where in 2012 a judge decided that poker is a game of skill. In that case, somebody was running their own gambling warehouse and got arrested for it, and eventually in court it was decided, after some witness testimonials, that poker is a game of skill, and if you basically do the math, That's all what it is in most cases. You will make more profit than you will lose. With that, we can conclude the legal aspects of poker. Now let's look at it from a logical perspective. Now, while there are many different games of poker like Texas Hold'em, Omaha, 7-Card Stud, and so on, we are going to focus on Texas Hold'em in this video because it's the mostly spread or wide known game out there, and so most of you already are familiar with the rules, or at least some basic rules about it. Now in Texas Hold'em, each player initially receives 2 cards which are called hole cards, and based on the number of suits and cards in the deck, there's theoretically 1,326 different combinations of cards that you can receive. However, because there's no difference when it comes to the starting hands before you have the community cards on the table, if you have an ace of hearts or an ace of spades, we can actually narrow it down to 169 different possible combinations that you can start with. And that's actually where we can start to figure out if poker is a game of skill or if it's a game of luck, because the difference between a recreational player that doesn't really understand the rules very well and just plays randomly and a professional player that consistently makes profit already starts at the moment when they receive their hole cards. To give you an example, a recreational player most likely would play almost any combination that contains an ace in his hand without paying much attention to the second card. For a professional player, however, the second card makes a huge difference, where ace-king would be a premium hand that he most likely will not fold and will be willing to raise and even go all in with pre-flop, so before the community cards are dealt. An ace-7 offsuit, so ace of diamonds with an 7 of spades, for example, instead of having both cards with the same suit, would most likely be a combination that a professional player would fold if somebody already raised to him. So you see, one of the key differences between a professional player and a recreational player, on the other hand, is that the professional player runs some kind of, let's call it, risk management to judge if he should risk his money with a certain combination of hands. And for that, he considers the 169 possible starting hands combination. He also considers where he is sitting at the table. So is he the first that has to act, which is called under the gun, or is he the last to act, which would be in the big blind before the flop, or is he sitting on the so-called button? And based on those factors and some other factors that we're going to ignore right now, a professional player makes the decision if he should play a certain hand or if he should fold it. Where a recreational player, for example, is almost always willing to go all in before the flop, so before the community cards, with a pair of tens, a professional player is able to fold a pair of tens if the action, so the things that happened before it is his turn, indicate that the other players most likely have better pairs like aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. Now obviously, as a poker player, you don't know exactly what kind of cards your opponent has. If you're playing against a recreational player, it's most likely a guessing game because that kind of player can hold any possible 2-card combination. However, when you see other players over and over again at the table and they are semi-professional players, you start to get a feeling what kind of hands they are playing, and that would be classified as their range. So you start to develop a feeling based on where another player is sitting and based on how he played in the past, what kind of hands he most likely will be willing to risk his money with in a certain spot. And based on that, you know his so-called range, and you can look at your own 2 cards and then you can evaluate how good your combination of cards performs against the entire range, so all the possible combination that you believe that player will be willing to play with in the current spot. And based on that, you are able to make a profit, because if you're able to determine the range of another player quite accurately, you will be able to estimate if your cards on average are more likely to win against his range or to lose against his range. And based on that, you will know if it's mathematically correct to either risk more of your money or to fold the hand and actually cut your losses or not lose anything at all. Now I know that's quite theoretical and it's hard to believe that people are able to estimate other people's ranges, but the more you play with somebody, the better of a feeling you get as to what kind of hands or starting hand combinations a player is willing to play with or risk his money with. So as you can clearly see, based on the information I provided you with, poker is mostly a game of skill. Luck only factors in the short run, but not when you play consistently and over a long amount of time, playing a lot of hands. Now what I would like to know from all of you guys is, do you agree? Do you see poker as a game of skill or as a game of luck? Let me know that in the comments down below. And if you want to discuss a little bit more about playing poker and different poker hands and mathematical probabilities, I encourage you to check the link in the description down below and follow my Twitch channel. And when I go live, you can just jump in and we can actually discuss poker while I'm playing poker. I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks for watching. And as always, see you in one of my other videos. Till then, bye bye.